This is the Best of the Bravest Nationwide Edition. So this one, and I know I sound like a broken record, but I mean this sincerely. This one's cool for me because part of the Nationwide miniseries, both what we're doing with the Beat, the police one, and Best of the Bravest Nationwide on the fire side, is naturally profiling different members of the fire service from around the country. But this one hits home because it literally is home. I'm a lifelong New Haven guy, born and raised New Haven, Connecticut. Tonight's guest served in the New Haven Fire Department. So to get him on, and it's been a while coming to have him on, it's going to be really, really fun. I'll get to him momentarily. He's in the back waiting patiently. But hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 327 of the Mike the New Haven podcast. It is the best, the bravest, like I said, the Nationwide edition. And this is volume 3. Volume 1 was Chief Rick Ettinger out of Virginia. That was a fun one. He also spent some time in Pennsylvania. Volume 2 was Chris Ebden, who was a fire captain in Pasadena, But prior to that, was in New York City EMS pre-FDNY merge. So a lot of interesting stories there. And volume 3 is tonight. Hello to everyone tuning in on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, all alike. In YouTube, I see here Don Gonzalez, Darren Phillips, and yes, indeed, go Rangers, Darren. The tough loss last night, but hopefully they can get Game 5 tomorrow. Will they take more years off my life in the process? Probably, but it'll be worth it if they win. Joe Maliga from Rochester, New York, and Billy Ryan, my favorite PI of them all. Good to see all of you. Just briefly, if you haven't checked out the previous episode, that was Best the Bravest, the FDNY miniseries, volume 61. Ron Canterman, who has Connecticut roots. He was chief of the Wilton Fire Department for a little bit. He's currently an inspector in the Bureau of Fire Prevention for the FDNY. But it was good talking with Ron. Good guy, wealth of knowledge. Taught at the University of New Haven for a long time as well. So we'll get to the ads real quick. First one, of course, my consulting company. Need advice on how to start your podcast? Frustrated with the editing process? Can't find a voiceover guy? Hi, I'm Mike Colón, and I'm here to help. I'm the owner and founder of MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company for all things media, where I can offer you consulting advice on how to get started, and once you get started, editing, as well as voiceover work, all for a very reasonable price. If you want to reach me, you can contact me at 917-781-6189 or the email that you see listed here. I'm always available, and I'm always willing to help. Again, 917-781-6189. Why go to some giant consulting firm that's going to charge you an arm and a leg when you can just come to me? If you want to be stress-free, the way to go is to call MC. MC Media Editing Services, your premier consulting company. And as always, speaking of premier, if you need a PI, Billy Ryan's the guy to go to. The Mike the New Haven podcast is proudly sponsored and supported by the Ryan Investigative Group. If you need an elite PI, look no further than the elite Ryan Investigative Group, which is run by retired NYPD detective Bill Ryan, a 20-year veteran of the department who served the majority of his career in the Detective Bureau, most notably in the Arson and Explosion Squad. So if you need a PI to handle anything from fraud, legal services, and anything else that you might require, contact Bill at 347-417-1610. Again, 347-417-1610. Reach him at his website or the email that you see here. Again, if you need a PI, look no further than Bill Ryan and the Ryan Investigative Group, a proud supporter and sponsor of the Mike the New Haven podcast. And as always, if the super chat is there, so if you want to contribute there, please do so. All right, won't keep my guests waiting too much longer. And, for those of you who think Connecticut is the armpit, the pit stop, if you will, between Boston and New York City, you are quite wrong in that assessment. We have a lot going on here, and New Haven's one of the cities that produces quite a bit of the notable events we have going on, good, bad, or indifferent. My next guest is certainly familiar with that. He's the author of Command Presence and a prolific contributor to major publications such as the Daily Caller, Newsweek, and The Hill. A fellow at Yankee Institute as well for public policy. He's a retired battalion chief and union president for my hometown, New Haven, Connecticut Fire Department, having served our city for 23 years, ranging from December of 1997 until his retirement in 2020. He serves currently as a contributing editor and advisory board member for Fire Engineering, co-host the show Politics and Tactics with roles as a drill master, former chief of special operations for the New Haven Fire Department, and a lead consultant for Yale. He's received several awards along the way, including the Medal of Valor, and that for this volume 3 of the Best the Bravest Nationwide edition out of New Haven, Connecticut, for the New Haven Fire Department, retired Chief Frank Ricci. Frank, welcome. How are you?
Mike, honor to be on your show. You're somebody I always held in high esteem, and you do a great job. So keep up the great work.
Oh, thank you very much. The feeling is mutual, my friend. So growing up in New Haven, what part of the city, if you did grow up in New Haven, that is, I shouldn't be presumptuous, but assuming you did, what part of the city did you grow up in? And if you didn't, where else were you?
I was born in New York, but I grew up in Wallingford. And as a kid, I'd go down to the parades in New Haven. Of course, pizza in New Haven. So it was always one of my dreams to become a New Haven firefighter.
Was there anybody in your family on the job that heightened that dream?
Uh, I had an uncle that was a New York City firefighter in Bedford-Stuyvesant. He ended up leaving due to an injury, but he got my brother John into the fire service. I have twin brothers. Both of them are now retired firefighters, one in Naugatuck and one retired as a battalion chief in Middletown. So it was kind of like when I grew up, we could either be a fireman, or a fireman. So I wanted to work in New Haven.
Right. No, and listen, for context, and I can explain this a little bit better. Usually I ask the question to the, and I guess I can still throw it to you as well, but I'll contribute. New Haven, we have over 100,000 people. I'm not going to give you the exact number, but we have over 100K in the city of New Haven alone. That number can swell up given our highways. And that, at times there's been instances where we've had 275, sometimes 300K people because of the traffic coming through. Hence why I say New Haven's got a lot going on. So you're never going to be bored. It's kind of what's the tagline people have used? The biggest, smallest city, something along those lines. Because, for example, I'm in the Foxen area of the city. Cross town is the Ville, and it's almost like night and day. So wherever you are in the city as a fireman or as a police officer, you'll have a heck of a time. You come on in December of 1997. How long did it take you? Because sometimes, listen, in a bigger city, getting hired may not happen right away.
It took me a long time and a lawsuit. I was living in a firehouse in Montgomery County, Maryland, and at the same time, I was working on a heavy rescue and ambulance for Bethesda Chevy Chase inside the Capitol Beltway with a response district in the District of Columbia. And I applied for the New Haven Fire Department, scored in the #1 bracket for the oral. The written was pass or fail, and I wasn't given the opportunity. So I filed a suit to kind of see where the bodies were. And as a result of that, I was hired.
Sometimes you got to make headway that way. And listen, it not only opens up the door for you, but it opens up the door for everybody else. So good on you. When you want something, hey, as long as it's not hurting anybody and you weren't hurting anybody, you were just pointing out a wrong, by all means, go ahead and do that. So December of 97 is when you get sworn in. And right away, you're out to truck 4, which was the busiest truck in the city. Now, we're not just talking from the standpoint of going to boxes, which we get our fair share of in New Haven, or any other call like an MVA, shooting, stabbings. Some medicals are mixed into that too. So going to a station like that, which if I remember correctly, is that Gulf Street where you went?
That's Gulf Street, yeah. Dixville's
that's the one I
on
remember.
Gulf Street, they call it Dixville Station.
Yeah. Yep. So being out there, which is again cross town from me, interesting area. You're not that far away from Yale, but you got some of the urban grit to it too. And you know what I'm talking about. Starting there and where you spent the first dozen years, tell me about those early, I want to say 97, 98, 99, 2000, that learning curve in the first 4 or 5 years for you.
It was just a great experience, great firefighters, always willing to learn. We were going to work, going to jobs, and it was just the diversity of that area and the demographics of the neighborhood is just so great because you get to really make an impact in individuals' lives. Because, I mean, you call 911, the fire department just shows up. We're the best government service that's out there. And Truck 4 covers Yale. It covers the bedroom community of Westville, but it also covers New Hallville and some of those more gritty neighborhoods that, have been underserved for the years, but they love the fire department because everybody in those neighborhoods, wants a better life. And they call 911, we just show up. So I loved working on Truck 4 and Engine 6. It was just a great learning experience.
Oh, yeah. And when I'm downtown, more specifically towards those parts, because when you start heading up to where that plaza is, or it's multiple different stores, and it's right in the heart of downtown. You got some stores right by Yale. There's a couple pizza joints around there. You're not that far away from the Dixwell station. So I see 6 engine and I see 4 truck quite a bit, in addition to the companies that are down at HQ, since that's their jurisdiction as well. I always ask this to guys coming on to PD or FD, those early years, you need father figures or even mother figures if there's women on the job to guide you through. Who would you credit, besides your family, of course, you could turn to for advice, but in the firehouse, who would you say was particularly instrumental in your growth early on?
Well, I think one of the keys with leadership and command presence is it doesn't really equate to rank, because the individual that had the most influence on me in the firehouse was Tommy King, who was a firefighter. And he stayed a firefighter his entire career and a chauffeur eventually of the truck. But he was just a phenomenal, calm, competent, and confident firefighter. Someone that was every single alarm you'd go on, he would take you after the fire and kind of walk you through, hey, this is what they did on the roof. This is where the first line came. This is where the second line came. And, you can be that leader. So regardless of what fire department you're in, whether you're running a job a shift or a job a month, when you have a fire and you have new firefighters, either the officer or a senior person, take those firefighters through. The firefighter might have been on the hydrant or on the pipe. Take them through. Make sure they climb the ladder, get to the roof, see what the members did on the roof. Make sure they go to the floor above. Hey, what were the challenges during the search? What you really do is you get a more rounded firefighter, and they'll start understanding how everything comes together at the job. And that's one thing that Tommy King always did. And, I worked on an engine. I worked on a heavy rescue. So when I came to New Haven, I was like, I want to kind of focus on that truck work to build up that part of my knowledge and experience.
And sometimes the truck is the rescue. I mean, in New Haven, we have a rescue now, Rescue 1, which is housed out of Whitney. I think they replaced Squad 4, which was there before. But, sometimes just depending on the situation, depending on the nature of the emergency, it doesn't even need to be a box per se. Your truck is your rescue. And we have a lot of good ones throughout the city. I mean, there was Truck 1 for a period of time. There's still Truck 4. There's a lot of good, solid trucks with good, solid people on them. You can depend on them. But speaking of fires and going through them after the job, as you just mentioned, that first job is always something. And sometimes it's a false alarm. Sometimes it gets called in as a box. You get all hopped up, but you go there, it's a big ball of nothing. What was that first fire for you where you said, okay, this is the real deal. I'm in it now?
It was actually great. So when I got assigned to Dixville Station, we weren't even through my first night, first shift. We weren't even through checking out the compartments and got a job. I think it was on Edgewood Avenue. I believe they firebombed the house, and it was a significant job. And it was just like, okay, this is what it's going to be like in a city department. And it was a really good job. And if there was one lesson, I had the advantage of already being a career firefighter for a little while and living in a firehouse. One thing I remember about that job, and it's a lesson to any probationary firefighter. If you get on the job in New Haven, Mike, remember this lesson. I'm hooking the ceiling, and one of the lieutenants come up, John Vendetto, and he goes to grab the hook away from me. I go, stop. Tell me where you want me to pull. Don't ever let anybody take your tool, because what happens is if you give your tool up to someone who didn't bring one or to an officer, what happens is they're hooking the ceiling, and lo and behold, now the chief walks in, the battalion chief walks in. You're standing there with no tool in your hand, looking like you're doing nothing, even though you've been working your heart out before that. So somebody ever tries to grab your tool, hold it and say, hey, stop. Where do you want me to pull? Everybody's got a role on the fire. So stick up for yourself a little bit. It'll actually build a little credibility with your peers.
Use your voice. I like that. Because that's one thing I've heard a lot of. Actually, a lot of the FDNY guys have said the same thing. Never give up your tool under any circumstances. Some guys would even emblazon it with their initials just so they wouldn't ever find themselves in that situation. And if they lost their tool somehow, people knew who it belonged to. So that's definitely good advice there. Thank you for that, considering what we talked about off the air. And naturally, I mean, listen, you had some experience prior in Maryland, so you weren't coming into it completely green, but they're still learning the city from a fire standpoint. So just early on, besides that first box, tell me about the boxes that stick out to you from that early period, or even not even the boxes. Like I said, other emergencies, shootings, stabbings, MVAs, where it's like, wow, man, we really are rocking and rolling in this part of New Haven.
We were talking offline about like funny calls. One of the things that sticks up to me, one of my first fires, tillering, when I got the opportunity to tiller Truck 4, which is the best job in the fire service. I had a job on Whaley Avenue, and Mark Harrison was a great firefighter. And I don't know whether I was cutting the scuttle or what I was cutting, but I was cutting something on the job. And the job wasn't that like crazy. It was just the normal bread and butter job. And Mark screamed at the top of his lungs my name, enough to startle me. Like I thought I was missing something. Especially because it didn't fit the circumstances that I was in. And I'm like, I look up and I'm like, what? He goes, Frank, if anything happens to you, I'll take care of your wife. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, I think it's in the knee wall. Just move down a little or something like that. It was kind of like that pause. So it was always fun in New Haven. New Haven is just a great fire department. And, I hope you become a member, Mike.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, like I said, I put the application in, so we'll see what happens. We'll see if I get called. You get the residency points too. The application's closed a few days ago for those of you in the New Haven area that may be thinking about applying, but it was open to both residents and non-residents alike. So they got a lot of applications. So they'll go through them, they'll parse them, and we'll see what happens when we get to that particular bridge. Firefighting changed a lot after 9/11 for cities of a larger variety because of the fact that now you're focused on multiple different things besides the conventional big city problems, if you will, and big city emergencies. Now there's a terrorism component. And when the Unabomber was going around earlier in the 90s, one of the places he picked, I believe, was Yale University. So now you're thinking about that, and you're first due, or you're one of the first due companies to that area of downtown where anything could happen at any time. So tell me about what went on. I mean, not the stuff that went on at the top, but just company prep within Ford Truck for any sort of mass casualty event after something like September 11th?
Um, Ironically, I was on injury on September 11th from a job where I fell in a shaft at
Ooh.
Yale University. And after I fell in the shaft searching for a trapped security guard, I was getting up and I heard a kink next to me. And it was somebody, it was Captain Bobby Gahuli, dropped his Halligan bar. And as I was getting ready to call a mayday, I was acting on the truck. We pulled up without an engine. The engine was out on a stabbing. As I got up kind of in a push-up position, he landed on top of me, ripping the muscles off my shoulders. So he calls me Cushion now, Mike. So we got out of that mess. And so I was a day out of surgery when 9/11 happened. So it was like, and actually the truck driver, Mark Harrison, called me that morning. And, I was teaching at FDIC at the time or working with fire engineering. And Mark goes, Frank, a lot of our friends are going to die today. And this was before any building collapsed. And I remember that vividly. And I remember going to one of the funerals where I was still in a sling from surgery. And, we went with one of the New York City companies and the guys were like, no, get up. You're sitting down. You're sitting down. You're not standing on the bus. So, I have a lot of respect for New York City firefighters, and individuals got to realize New Haven is a international city. We not only have to, because of Yale, we have to worry about dignitary protection. We got to worry about, not only did we have the Unabomber, we also had a bombing at the Yale Law School where they never caught the individual that did significant damages years after the Unabomber. You pretty much got to worry about a little bit of everything because you have a little bit of everything in New Haven, whether it's a high-rise tenement, the tank farm. So after 9/11, it really wasn't so much the preparation for Truck 4. It was the preparation for the department. We didn't have the rescues at the time. We had 2 squad companies. So one of the things that the department did was start working with the police department to train them as hazardous material technicians. And in the recruit program, when I was in the recruit class, we were the first class that went through the terrorism training before 9/11. So it was just starting to build up from there. And finally, when I was drill master, you called me the chief of operations. Technically, I was the highest ranking chief assigned to SOC, special operations, because I was the drill master, Car 81, per the union contract. So we kind of moved to that special operations format, but it took years to get there. But we were always ready for that mass casualty incident. And, if you got somebody studying for the lieutenant's test or your lieutenant or captain, whenever you assign, or battalion chief, whenever you assign that EMS branch, you always got to remember firefighter rehab, triage, treatment, patient tracking, because some chief or politician is going to want to know who went to what hospital, what their injuries were, and transportation corridor. That we've seen that time and time again across this country. You get an active shooter. We had the SWAT situation in North Haven that New Haven was called to,
Yes.
where the SWAT team, or whatever you want to call them nowadays, were making entry in a post-hostage situation where a hostage actually escaped and went to the firehouse. Everybody goes to the firehouse, and notified. And again, transportation corridor, one of the first things that I did, special call in there, was go up to the chief of North Haven and say, I'll make sure we can get resources in and out for you. Because as you know, as much as we love the cops, they can't all park on the same side of the street. So they all got to park on opposite sides of the street. So you got to be thinking, if you're a chief, do I need to call tow trucks on this box? Because I'm going to have cop cars parked and blocked everything when I need to get ambulance in and out. So our whole methodology, our whole mindset changed from the time I was on truck 4 to where we finally took years to get a heavy rescue, to get a SOC support vehicle, to get special ops, and actually move to a SOC model. Now the trucks are actually part of SOC, and we have meters on the trucks. We have cribbing on the trucks. And the theory behind that, because I negotiated that deal as union president, is I wanted the trucks, I actually wrote in the trucks to be on SOC, because how we sold it to the chief was we wanted to increase diversity on the rescue, and we wanted to kind of start a farm team, because 5 individuals on a rescue can't set up for a confined space rescue and do it safely, efficiently, and effectively. They're not going to be able to do a hazmat call where an entry, you need somebody to do decon. So we needed to use those trucks as kind of the farm team. You know, can they set up a system? Can they be part of the haul team? Can they set up decon? Can they be valuable at a confined space as aiding that rescue company? So that's how New Haven's set up now, is the trucks are actually part of SOC. When I was a firefighter, the trucks pretty much went to fires, water emergencies, things of that nature, but their roles are expanding as the department moves to an all-hazard model under the leadership of Chief Alston. And I give him and Danny Coughlin and Mark Vendetto a lot of credit for those building years and those continuing to move out to get the department where it needs to be, because you never know what's going to happen in New Haven.
Case in point, the collapse we had a few months ago in downtown New Haven, where there's construction going on right by Gateway Community College, which is where I went to for a number of years. Right in that general vicinity where a few new buildings are going up in the area of the of Tower 1, Tower East, there was a collapse, which thankfully didn't result in any deaths, although a few construction workers were seriously injured. And what were the trucks doing there? Well, to your point, they were in that SOC support role, and they were able to make some great assistance, some great rescues as a result. So that foresight, quite literally, can be the difference. And this is no hyperbole, no exaggeration, between someone living and someone dying.
You're 100% right. When I became the drill master, Mike, and knowing that we were moving to this all hazards thing, I started doing, they started before me doing SOC Friday, where they would train the special operation companies and the trucks a little bit on SOC type operations. And the training academy is great in New Haven. It's a great proving ground, but take confined space, for example. That's good for your initial certification. But after that, you got kind of diminishing returns if you're going to keep training firefighters there. So one of the things I did at Drill Master that worked out really well, and it happened with Mark Vendetto and Chief Alston really coming to the forefront, is before they got there, I would try to get the chiefs and say, hey, look, we got a tower crane going up in the city. We need to do some training off that. We have an active confined space where they're working. We need to do some training on that. And I hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And I'm like, you expect our personnel to operate at the highest level, but you won't let me take them off the training academy to train. And Chief Alston was the one who took down those roadblocks. We had another 140-foot tower crane at Yale go up. And I was like, Chief, I want to take all the rescue companies through, and we're going to lower the operator. We made a deal with the union. It was easy because I was president. We got there at 4 a.m. No members complained. They loved it. We did one operation, lowered the operator from the top of the tower, then critiqued the operation. And then we started repeating that. We'd go to the barges off Ferry Street, you know, because they're working and they're grinding in those barges. So
Yes, they are.
Place that will have a confined space rescue. So we started, okay, we're going to do all 4 divisions, just do 1 or 2 operations and critique it. And we'll start building that muscle memory, because all special operations skills build on others. If you're doing a high angle rescue, it builds on a swiftwater rescue. It builds on confined space. All the skills are kind of interchangeable, and all skills are perishable. So those drills we were finding were bringing up everybody, and I'm hoping that the department is going to continue to. We even work with Jordan's Furniture in the winter. Yep. They got that ropes course. I made an agreement with them that we could do pickoffs and lowering operations in Jordan's Furniture in the winter when it was super cold. Chris Sikowski, the director of the training now, I know he's been working with the tank farm to do operations down at the tank farm. So if you're doing training and you're responsible for a department across the country, you know, you got to remember, these members need, if you're going to call them at 3 o'clock in the morning and expect them to perform, You got to give them the opportunity to do training. Just like if you're a firefighter with vacants, it's not a shot at anybody, but we have kids that never even cut the lawn. Never mind cut a hole in the roof at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's on fire. You can't have kids in the training academy cut pallets, check them off on firefighter 1 and say, you're good to go. No, you need to take a small group, build them up, start with the pallets, get vacants, work with your housing authority, work with your fire marshal. Even in the smallest town, I burned houses in Madison, Connecticut. I mean, work with your fire marshal, get a small crew there so that you can start with the pallet, start with proper saw care, proper safety, and then move to, okay, cutting a roof on a flat roof, cutting a pitch roof. We need to take opportunities. I remember when I was a firefighter on Truck 4, Chris Ryan, who's either a battalion chief or deputy in the city now, he'll tell you, my neighbor in Wallingford was putting an addition on their house, and they were ripping off the roof. So I asked the neighbor, hey, I got a new Proby on my shift. Can we come up and cut some holes in your roof? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. So I took Chris and we cut some holes. So, get opportunities, but the fire marshals are key, and it needs to start in the training academy. You don't have to work in a socioeconomically deprived neighborhood. They're always knocking down houses, putting on a new roof, doing something. You got to get that hands-on fun training so that you get people to buy into training. Training should never be punitive. And it starts with, as a firefighter, having the passion to try to keep your tools clean and, your saw clean, getting ready to go. But as that company officer, you got to do something with your crew every day. And if the weather's bad, you take them for a walk through a building, or you stretch a line. But as the boss, you got to participate as well. And then even if you just do one quality operation and then critique it, eventually you're going to get everybody involved. You're going to get people buying into training, and you're going to just increase that effectiveness of your crew so they can strive for tactical excellence just by giving them an opportunity to train. Nobody was born a great firefighter, but I could train anybody to be a great firefighter if they have it in their heart.
And you know what? Any good department, and I think New Haven obviously understands this, where I work in West Haven, they understand this too. They get, okay, yeah, we can't just give a kid an SOP and have them read through it and say, okay, that's how you're going to learn, And listen, I'm not saying SOPs aren't important. They are. Read through that, yes, but that's just a little part of it. That's just that you're just nibbling. That's an appetizer. It isn't. And most people, I fit in this category, that's for sure. I'm a visual learner. You can tell me when we get to a box, this is what you're going to do on the roof, or if you're on the engine, this is what you're going to do if you're on the engine. But if you show me and say, no, we're going to take you down to a neighborhood. Let's do some pump operations. Let's do truck ops just so you can simulate. When I see it, that's when, as along with a lot of other kids in my age gap of this particular generation, will go, okay, now I know what you're talking about. And like you said, I love it too, where you mentioned that it's not punitive. It should be fun. Not only is it important to know, so that when you get on the fireground, you can help yourself and help those around you. But it's fun to want to learn the job. And if you have that attitude and if you have that motivation, the worst thing a boss, whether it be lieutenant, captain, so on and so forth, can do is quash that enthusiasm, sometimes without intending to. But if you don't train the kid, he or she is going to lose that drive as time goes along.
Absolutely. And it's also the firefighter's attitude. It comes down to attitude. It's not, I have to check out the saw, or I have to check out the equipment, or I have to clean the toilet. It's, I got to do that. You kind of want that positive mindset of, Scott Longear, great firefighter in the city of New Haven. He used to say, I get the opportunity to cook for my crew. He'd go cook food. He'd go buy the food when he was off duty, so we have good quality food, bring it in, cook a nice meal in the firehouse. He always viewed it as an opportunity, not as an obligation. And firefighters need to know that when you're a new firefighter, somebody asked me one time in the firehouse, said, how do I get to be a chief or a lieutenant when I walk in and I'm eating dinner where somebody comes to get my plate, or somebody says, hey, chief, can I make you a cup of coffee? I said, you be the firefighter who never lets the officer wash their plate. You gotta start off. And, I know you do a lot with New York City. So I'll tell you a New York City story that I think will resonate for this. So I was with Jay Jonas at a Ladder 27 at a dedication with Howard Blythe, who's a great firefighter from Connecticut. You should have him on your show. Teaches truck ops at FDIC. Brilliant individual. So we're there with Jay Jonas, and I noticed at ladder 27 in the Bronx, on the stainless steel sink, and I got a picture of it in my book, there's 2 firefighters' names in like Sharpie. And I go, what's that? And Jay Jonas goes, and I think he's a deputy chief or chief of operations. He's got some big title in New York City. And he, famed from what happened at 9/11. And he goes, I was a rookie in this firehouse, and that's one of my only regrets on the job is I don't have a picture when my name was on the sink, because when you're a probie, you put your name on the sink, and that means you're responsible for any dish in there. You own the sink. You have to have pride in the sink. And then when the next probie comes, they take a little acetone, take your name off, and write in the next probie. So here's a guy of, that everybody holds in high esteem, a competent, great guy saying, wow, I wish I had a picture because I could have put that in my office with my name on the sink. So anything you do, there's a lot of downtime in any firehouse, even the busiest firehouse. Do an extra 15 minutes of anything. You'll make your reputation, because only 10% of the stuff we do, Mike, is really cool. Okay. 10% is really cool, but your reputation is made on all of that other stuff. And the individuals that will go the extra yard in checking out their equipment, making sure there's water in the tank. If you're on the pipe or hydrant and you're not taking the pipe off as a new firefighter, making sure there's nothing stuck in the bail, if you're not going on top of the piece and opening it up and making sure there's water in there, I pulled up on a job once where it was a big trailer fire, and the engines just shop with Tony Cap. They just swapped the engines, and the engine had no water in it. So they had to recover and hit the hydrant. So, attention to detail and doing that extra 15 minutes will really build your reputation for when you're on the job as a worker.
Mm-hmm. Because even if nobody's saying anything, and I experience this to a lesser extent, even though I'm the civilian side right now, you see it with probies that walk in. They're if they don't say anything outwardly, they're looking. And the time is going to come where they're going to have that conversation, and you may be around for it, you may not be, where they may say something good, they may say something not so good. It depends on how you carry yourself. And sometimes the mistakes are unintentional. You have to learn as you go. And a lot of people pick up the pieces and do learn and do better as a result. But how you come in means everything, because there's nothing better, and especially if you're rooting for someone to do well, than when they're not around and the person's name comes up and they say, good firefighter. Got the right attitude, got the right stuff, good kid. When you got senior guys or gals saying that about you, it means the world. But it starts with those little things, because that's the things they bring up. They don't bring up training. They don't bring up box alarms. That's part of it. That comes into the conversation later. The first thing is the sink. The first thing is the attitude. The first thing is the cleaning that's done around the firehouse. And it adds up over time.
You're 100% right. It's how you make your bones, and know that you're not always going to be in that position. You're going to move up. But if you ever want to be a lieutenant, and it's one of the problems that I see in the fire service, and one of the reasons I wrote a book, is too many people may not watch this podcast. They may not take a class on leadership. They may not take that extra class because right now they're thinking, I just want to be the best firefighter I can be. The problem is what you do as a firefighter is going to vastly impact how you are as an officer and that credibility you have as a boss. So you don't want anybody to ever you don't ever want to diminish your own command as a lieutenant, captain, or chief on what you used to do when you were a firefighter. So kind of always put that mindset. Hey, it may be 5-10 years before I make rank, but when I make rank, I want to make sure that when I give an order or a suggestion, or if you have enough credibility, you actually got to give less orders, because people will respect you and they'll do more of what they're supposed to do. And even if you're moving to a different firehouse, they'll know your reputation follows you everywhere on how you're going to be and what you're going to be like in the firehouse.
Mm-hmm. And let's use that to segue back to your career. 2009, you make lieutenant. Now, this is an interesting point in that I don't fault anybody that makes lieutenant. If you take the time to study, if you take the time to learn what the rank entails, it doesn't matter how much time you have on the job, as long as you're committed to being a good fire officer. That's one of the main things that counts. You had a dozen years, so you were kind of already in that mentorship role, because naturally rookie firefighters are coming in, and we've talked about it. What are you doing? You're taking the lead and training them. You're bringing them up as you go. So the lieutenant transition becomes a little bit easier. When did the process to start taking classes on leadership or studying and hitting the books hard start for you? Was it right away when you came out in 97, or was it something you dug into the more time you had?
No, I was always in the books, and I had great officers. Lou Rivera, who ended up, coming from lieutenant, he retired as a deputy chief. He would do a drill every day when we were in Dixwell Station. I had John Shepa, John Hines. I always had I really was blessed with great officers that did training. So I always stayed in the books. I was always taking classes, and classes are open to anybody. Just because you become a city firefighter doesn't mean you can't learn something from somebody from West Haven. Because let me tell you, you can. And a lot of people say, oh, I work in New York City or I work in New Haven. Well, where do you work? Take New Haven, for example. If you're not on 6s, truck 4, 10s, truck 3, 9s, you may go to fires. It doesn't mean you're working at fires, because most of the fires happen in 6s, 9s, and 10s area, a little bit 11s area, but 11, the hill, they don't go out of the hill. So they get good first due fires, but they're not getting second or third due. So if you're not in one of those busy companies, you may be going to fires, but you're not really working. So you can learn something from anybody, whether they work in West Haven or whether they work in Middletown. I've learned so much from my brother. Wallingford is a bedroom community. They get 1 fire a year. If you read my book, I quote Chris Sunwall, who's a battalion chief there. I put him against any city battalion chief, even with their 1 fire a year, but even his interpersonal skills of how he interacts with his crew. You can learn something from everybody. So stay in the books. There's no reason. It's one of the things that I'm really proud of as union president is I worked with John Alston, and we made sure that we put in together, the union and Chief Alston, we put in that when you become a recruit firefighter in New Haven, you know what the books are for the lieutenant's test, the captain's test, battalion chief's test, and deputy's chief test, and I believe the chief of operations. And what we set up is you always have the rules and regs, always have the SOGs, but if the book's edition changes 6 months before, say 5 months before the test, you go by the old edition. If it changes 7 months before the test, you go by the new edition. So as a firefighter, you can already start learning and start getting your head in the books. And the officers can also have the wherewithal when they don't have to do a company drill. They could pick out, okay, hey, here's a chapter on high-rise or tenement fires, or hey, John Norman's book from New York City. Let's take a chapter from there because we're probably going to have this on, we know we're going to have it on the lieutenant's test. Why is it a surprise? Why are departments around the country changing their books on every test besides their rules and regulations? We want everybody to have the answers because we want them to be competent firefighters and competent officers. So putting in that reading list so that individuals could have a roadmap to success, that's how you move the fire department further. It's through education, not through quotas, through education. And another thing that I'm proud of that we did is we mandated, when I came on the job in New Haven, there was probably, I think, don't quote me on this, I think there were 6 or 7 firefighters that were fire officer 1. And I was one of them as a probationary firefighter. John Alston and I, Chief Alston and I, put in, and it grew as the department grew. It ended up being so many firefighters and lieutenants started taking classes. But now, through an MOU with the union and Chief Alston, we actually put an MOU that now 1 year they're teaching fire instructor 1, and the next year they're teaching fire officer. Then they go to fire officer 1 again. So we're building up everybody. And when I came on in the job, they would dumb down the academy. You wouldn't even have to pass fire 1 or fire 2. You could graduate New Haven with no credentials. And they thought they were helping people out. But what they were really doing was holding people back, because here you'd have somebody who grew up in New Haven, okay, regardless of race. They grow up in New Haven. They go to the academy. They think they're doing them a favor. We're not going to get them certified by the state of Connecticut. It doesn't matter. We'll just give them fake tests. We'll dumb down the test as long as they know our SOPs. But then what would happen is after the academy, you'd see something, a class for the Connecticut Fire Academy, and you'd be like, oh, I want to take that class. And you look in the fine print, prerequisite, need to be certified fire 1 and fire 2 to take rescue corps, to take another class. So we fought even before I was in the union chairs when I was on the safety committee, is we need to make sure that individuals in the training academy are getting certified to fire 1 and fire 2, so we can bring everybody's education level up. So now they have the prerequisites so they can succeed and go further. When it comes to diversity, that's how you achieve it, is through education. So I think that the fire department, in light of the Ricci case, has really moved together and also showed that labor and management can work together and provide that roadmap and provide solutions and opportunities instead of obstacles.
And if you want someone, I'll use an athletic analogy, right? How did Wayne Gretzky get to be as good as he was at hockey? His father taught him. His father didn't just put him on the ice and say, all right, here's the puck, here's your stick, figure it out, kid. I'll be in the back if you need me. No, it was a training process, and he got better and better and better as he went on to become the greatest player the sport has ever seen. Same thing with something that can kill you if you're not adequately prepared to do it. Imagine that. Imagine sending someone into a job where something can happen, and it has happened. That's why there's the National Firemen's Memorial, where you can die, and saying, figure it out. You don't got to pass. You got it. No. So that's I love how you mentioned that, because if everyone has the same education, that's how you weed out the ones that aren't going to cut it, and that's how you truly achieve having the best people on the job. Any job, educate them all.
Mike, Tom Brennan, our past editor of fire engineering, a New York City firefighter and chief of Waterbury, Connecticut, said it best. You can never learn enough about a job that can kill you.
Mm-hmm. That's a quote that I have heard many a time over, and it never loses its power for me because of that reason. And when you look at the wall on that, on that Fireman's Memorial, it doesn't matter if it's career, volunteer, anywhere in the country. That's why that quote hits as hard as it does. It's a job that can kill you. It doesn't even have to be a fire. Sometimes it's just getting to the call, and there's an accident along the way. That's why it's important to learn things like EVOC. You can never train enough for a job like this. And so being a lieutenant, and turns out you were right around the corner from me, because as we talked about off the air, Lombard Station, that's about 5 minutes from my house. So with 17 Engine, which is over on East Grand, is tied up with the medical, usually at Bella Vista. It would be 10 Engine that would be first due to my particular area. So being there.
Like, I'm retired, so I can throw shots now. You know what we call Engine Company 17 in New Haven?
What?
Say this as a lieutenant from TENS. So TENS is the island of misfit toys. And if you look below the company logo, it's in Latin. And it says, we're all alone. So we used to call Engine Company 17 the house of no firefighters, no house fun, no ketchup, no cable TV. So that was the house of no, because we'd go to their fires second due and put out their fires.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a company that it's a single engine. I mean, it has a utility vehicle there, but it's a very old vehicle. It doesn't get used a lot. And I hear them a lot. And usually when I see them, they're making that right turn right when you hit that Walgreens. I'm like, I know where you're going, and I don't envy you for it. So apologies to anybody in 17 Engine. I'm sorry you got to deal with that. But hey, so
don't worry, is coming.
Yeah, exactly. So being in an area like Lombard, I'm going to paint the picture for the audience. You're pretty much right at the precipice of Fairhaven, where if you turn, you're heading down in a ferry, that Seatown area. It's a very heavy Black Hispanic population. You're not that far away from 17. You have the Ferry Street Bridge there as well. And there's a lot. And then if you go upwards, you're heading towards the first student area, which is where the school buses are. So it's a pretty big territory you're covering. Being a lieutenant there is so much fun because, like we talked about earlier, you're busy. It could be medicals, it could be MVAs, it could be boxes. You're never going to be bored. Tell me about what you most enjoyed and what emergencies from that time period, 4 years, stick out most.
Working at TENS was great because while I loved working in the Newhall section of the city, which is predominantly a Black neighborhood, Fairhaven is predominantly an Ecuadorian neighborhood now. So it's a very vastly different cultures, but you can learn from any culture. And coming from Truck 4, now I had to learn a complete district. So when I made my map book, I actually wrote on the side of the map book the panic book, because I didn't care what was happening once I got to the job. People jumping out of the windows, fire. I was good with that. My source of panic was getting there because I didn't know the streets. And knowing the streets is so critical. And one thing Jay Schwartz taught me in the academy, he was a lieutenant at Eights, that is a lesson for anybody in the fire service in America today, is I would always drive a different way into work every day. He told us in the academy, because you want to learn the city the best way, drive a different way into work every day. Even if you got to go by the firehouse and go back, pay attention to the street signs and the number breaks. So I did that, but I still wasn't familiar with the neighborhood. It's surrounded by water. We didn't have that on the other side. So you have the ocean, you have the river. It's a more of a neighborhood, and the neighbors interact. The kids come to get their bikes fixed. They come and interact with the firefighters, where you really didn't have as much of that just because the way the firehouse was designed in the streetscape. But Tens is right on the street corner, and it's just a great, I mean, both were great neighborhoods, but at Truck 4 and Engine 6, you interacted with the neighbors on calls, which were phenomenal. But at Tens, you got to interact with the neighbors every day. If you were sitting in front of the firehouse, you were interacting with the neighborhood and the kids. And that's really what it made it enjoyable. I mean, and I got the fire gods have always been good to me. My first night at Tens, I was there maybe 2 hours, and I got a rocking job on Dover Street, first due. And, I remember I'm putting on my hitch, and the driver was Ron DeMattis, who grew up in Fairhaven. He could tell you what color the house was in front of the hydrant. And as I'm putting on my night hitch, he looked at me and he goes, "Hey, Lou, there's a hydrant on the corner. We could take it going in." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to love this place." So, and as a boss, I said, "Look, I'm never going to put anybody to drive unless we don't have anybody, and I got to get ordered and I got to get somebody to drive." I had my first cousin on my shift out of 40 shifts. My first cousin was on my shift. I was an adjunct instructor at the academy for a lot of recruit classes. So I had my cousin, and I had a couple people I trained, but it was also one of the most senior shifts in the city. So it was a real challenging assignment, but it was just a fun assignment where you could learn on every fire, every shift. And it was just a great company. And, again, I went in there and they were like in a panic. "Oh, Frank Ricci's the fire engineering guy. He's going to come in. He's going to have us training." I'm like, "No, well, I'm going to do one drill, one evolution. Then we're going to critique it, and just one a day. That's it." And I knew I was making progress when one day I was vice president of the union at the time. I got stuck on a phone call, and I'm making a phone call, and one of the senior guys walked into my office and goes, "Hey, Lou, are we going to go do something today?" And I was like, "Wait, what just happened here?" But they knew that I would participate in the drill. I'd go first, and we would do something to build our skill level. And too many officers think that when you become an officer, you just step back, you critique training. No, you have to be a part of your company training, because you are you're the officer. You're working as part of that team. So you got to build your own skills with them. And that brings up morale on the shift. But it was a great shift, great experience. Probably one of the funniest calls wasn't even a fire. So I got a call. I wasn't there that long. I got a call for a kayaker in the Quinnipiac River screaming for help. And we get there, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, let's go back to my Montgomery County, DC Swiftwater training. I dispatched a firefighter upstream with a radio and a life jacket to report anything coming down the Quinnipiac, because the water level was high. And then, there was no way we were going to do a throw bag or swim out to the kayak that was overturned. So I went to the marina and I stole a boat. So as I stole the boat, I'm thinking, hey, do I ask the battalion chief? And then I'm like, no, when in command. So I'm not going to put that on the battalion chief to make a decision. I'm there. I got all the information. I'm the one that's in the best position to make the decision. We stole a boat. And as I'm coming out of the marina, I look to Joe Hilbert, who's now a battalion chief in the city. And I go, well, Joe, if the Coast Guard gets to the kayak first, you're going to be getting a new lieutenant. So let's make sure we get there, because the Coast Guard was coming. And lo and behold, the Coast Guard took the wrong boat. So I didn't even know this at the time. There's a sandbar in the Quinnipiac, and there's only one boat that if they can't get past the Ferry Street Bridge. So they took the wrong boat and got stuck at the Ferry Street Bridge. We got to the kayak first. And then it turned out that the wind blew it off. There was nobody screaming that the neighbors reported. There was no victim. We spent all night searching. And so we made sure we filled up fuel for the boat, brought it back. And the next morning when I woke up, I don't know how they did it, but the shift got a pirate flag and they put it on the back of Tens. So I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be all right here. But it was just something different, because that's the greatest thing about being in the fire department. And that's why you got to keep taking classes and you got to keep training, because you never know what you're going to get. I wasn't expecting, oh, I'm Fairhaven, I'm going to get a kayaker, screaming for help, even though it was just blown off the dock. But the people on the shore were like, we heard them screaming. They're in trouble. There was nobody there. So I don't know where that came into play, but you got to be prepared for anything, and you got to trust your personnel. And sometimes you got to make decisions. You got to wear your rank and, make the decision and let the battalion chief kind of cover your blind spots when they get there. But you don't want to be that company officer where you're always on the radio asking for something. No, they put you there for a reason. When in command, command.
Yeah, of course. And it's funny, that river runs for a while. It runs right up until my area. So if you're in 17 engine, or if you're over in 10s and 3s, you have that. You have that area right there, because it not only runs through Fairhaven, it runs into Quinnipiac. It stops right behind the Walmart Lowe's area. That's at least where I see it stopping. If you're out on Morris Cove and you're in 16 engine, same thing. So it'll run a while. It'll definitely keep you busy. I mean, I remember years ago, a gentleman was on the train tracks right where first student is. I don't know why. I don't know if he was trying to end his life or if he was just wandering. Point is, unfortunately, he was struck by a train and killed. He got thrown into the river. So there's a situation where you're not expecting something like that. It's about a good 10 years ago. And nevertheless, what did 3s have to do? What did 10s have to do? Search for him. And not only that, but it's worth noting with 10s area, depending on the nature of the call, if it's a big call, you make a left out of 10s. I used to live on Bishop Street. I don't now. You could be in my area as well, which is a little bit more high end, a little bit more upscale. It's right before you hit downtown. So 10s is really a sweet spot, again, if you want to be busy and if you want to go to different calls, because you got the urban grit right where you are, the heavy Hispanic population. But you make a left, you got Yale Secondary Campus. And even though Whitney Avenue is first due to that, you could be second due.
Absolutely. It's a great place to make your bones, because you need to make your bones on a first due engine company and a truck. I wrote about Justin McCarthy's story, who was an assistant chief in New Haven. He's assistant chief in Greenwich now. Probably will come back to New Haven one day as a chief, is my prediction. But he started at Truck 4 and Engine 6. And then he made his bones on those companies, and he had the opportunity to go to the squad. And so he did really well in the squad, built his reputation, and then he was making lieutenant. And he came to me and he said, hey, Frank, I'm making lieutenant. I think I'm going to be able to stay on the squad as a lieutenant. And I'm like, Justin, that's the worst thing that you can do. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, if you're on a squad or your rescue, while that's a position in high esteem that everybody says, oh, the rescue, you're not making decisions as a first due boss. So I said, ask to go to 10s or 6s or Truck 4. So you're going to fires first due. You're making those hard decisions, trying to make perfect decisions based off imperfect information. Make your bones, do at least a year, and then go to the squad or the rescue. And that's what he did. And he credits that. He's like, that was one of the best moves because it built his credibility. All too often in life and in the fire service is we get too comfortable and we make decisions based off, I'm working with this great group of guys or girls. The fact of the matter is transfers happen, shifts change. Don't ever make a decision based off the shift you're with, because 5 years from now, you're going to go back to that shift. And because of transfers and promotions, it's going to look like a different shift. It may be the same chauffeurs and drivers, but you always want to be willing in life to make yourself a little bit uncomfortable and look for those challenging assignments. If you come out of the academy and you end up on a slow company, then you want to put in, when you make your reputation there, I want to go to 6s. I want to go to busy company. And then if you learn the engine and you're in a single house, okay, I want to go to a double house. Even though I may not be comfortable there, I want to learn the truck. I want to get qualified on this piece of apparatus. You always got to be growing and be willing to make yourself a little uncomfortable. And one of the things when it comes to mentoring that we see today is a lot of new people think that it's the fire department's responsibility to mentor you. No, go up to the senior person when they're checking out the saws and say, hey, can you teach me how to change the saw blade? Hey, can I put up the stick when you're doing it in checkout? Can I help you with your checkout? If you put yourself in a position to succeed and go up to those senior members and say, hey, I really want to learn this. Can you help me out? There's nobody that's going to tell you no on the job. But people come on the job today and they think like the senior person's got to come to them and put them under their wing. No, show some initiative. They want to see you step up and say, hey, I don't know how to do this. And when you make a mistake, everybody does. This whole job isn't about making the right calls. It's how you recover. Is that make a mistake, you just own it and say, hey, now I know, or I wouldn't do that, and kind of share it. Don't think that making a mistake is going to all of a sudden destroy your reputation. No, if you make a mistake, own it and learn from it. You'll be fine, but reach out to those individuals and say, hey, can you show me this? And if you show some initiative, somebody is going to take you under their wing on that shift, guaranteed.
And that's the key. If you show that you care, and if you have, like we talked about earlier, that right attitude, our guy's going to bust your chop. Yeah, it's a firehouse. Of course, they're going to bust your chops. That means they like you. That's a good sign. But if they see that you're taking it seriously, for as much as they may razz you, they will do everything in their power to make sure they take care of you and to make sure that you're taught the way you have shown that you wanted to be taught. And I'll ask you about this as well in relation to your career. I can see where the passion led you to want to join the union. You know, if there's a way to stay on the front line and make sure things are taken care of for your members and take a load off of them, hey, by all means, stretch your hand out and try to do that. But it is, as we talked about, in any city or any town where you're part of a union, whether it be police, whether it be fire, public sector unions are not easy. Unions are not easy, period. And here you are with 14 years in the job when that chapter started, right in the middle of a court case that went for 7 years, which you can also touch on. So being involved in something like that, which in a city like ours is quite the undertaking. Tell me about how you counteracted the stress, because it takes a toll not only professionally, but if you're juggling a family life with your other family too, it could take a toll there as well. So how did you juggle that?
Was it Andrew Jackson said, I was born in the storm and the calm doesn't suit me. So I was somebody who was always active, and it was just, we had Pat Egan, who was union president, who got us our staffing agreement, got us one of the best contracts, took the time to mentor me when I was on the safety committee. And I was like, okay, I need to be in this position. And it just was one of those things. And I loved being the union vice president and the union president. But the big difference is, if you're going to do that job right, you have to be a communicator. And I wasn't somebody, Mike, as you probably know, you know a lot of the same people I know. I have a tough personality. You either love me, you will find people that love me or hate me. Okay. There's no in between there. But being in that position, you have to be a great communicator. You have to stay on message. It also helped me be a good officer, is to be able to stay on message and communicate. And one of the things is, as you become a lieutenant, a captain, a battalion chief, you get insulated by rank because you're talking to less and less people. But even as you go up through rank, if you're the union president or vice president, all 367 people got your cell phone and they're calling you. And if you're doing the job right, you're answering and returning every single phone call. And I pride myself on that. And God bless my wife, because my wife and kids took kind of the back seat to all of the union things, because there's always an event in the city. There's always a dinner you got to go to. There's always a speech you got to give. You got to go to the alderman meeting. You got to go to the Democratic town chairperson meetings. You're always out. You're always about, you always got to be advocating for the fire service. And, it blows my mind. I was just teaching at FDIC, and one of the things I asked, and one of the things we did in New Haven, is we started tracking and making a policy to track property saved versus property lost. Even in New Haven with a busy fire department, if you go to a food on the stove call, okay, there may be $200 worth of damage. But if you stop that food on the stove call, the public loves you because you saved all their belongings. The public doesn't want you to cut a hole in their roof. They want you to save their pictures, their memories. They want you to make an impact on their life. That kitchen fire means so much to them. But what do firefighters say? Oh, I didn't do anything last night. I went to a kitchen fire. No, you made a positive impact, which is going to help us with staffing for when we get the fire. So we started tracking property saved as well, because now that $500 loss, if it's a $100,000 home, well, look, now those statistics are going to even outweigh and show how effective your fire department is. It's all trying to market the fire department. And I think because of the team I had, and one of the things that's very important as a union president is you can't just have yes people around you. Papasaurus, Democrat. Everybody knows I'm a conservative. Okay. Democrat was one of my most trusted reps on the union e-board because he would challenge me all the time, not to put me down, but to make sure he was covering any blind spot I had. And so our friendship, and I hated him when he was in the academy. So I mean, literally hated him. Thought he was going to be a horrible firefighter. I was wrong. Very, very rarely, most times I could tell if somebody has a passion for the job. Hated him in the academy. Became a great firefighter. He's a battalion chief now in the city, but
Nice.
a Democrat. And I used him to kind of, you got to realize that if you look at anybody great through history, okay, look at Martin Luther King, Gandhi, George Washington, they all had their detractors. And that criticism made them better leaders. So if you're a boss, if you're the union president, or if you're a lieutenant, people are going to talk about you. You have to take that and then realize that when somebody's throwing rocks at you, pick them up and build something out of it. Yes, some of it's malicious, but some of it is going to be actual valued criticism that's going to help kind of let you navigate things. Now, it may resolve your position. You may say, hey, that person's wrong. That's okay too. But sometimes you're going to find that, hey, you're making a mistake here and you need to change things around. So take those rocks and build something with them and move. And don't demonize your detractors, because one day they may be an individual that supports you. So I was somebody who believed in process. If you can protect, I may not be able to defend the individual that's getting called to the chief's office, the act of what they did, but I would always invoke my inner John Adams, and I would always defend the process. If they're going to be guilty by the chief of, so they can meet that just cause standard, they had to prove it. The chief had to prove it. I was going to fight for hell like our members. And, I never lost an election in the city from the time I was on the e-board, vice president and president. And I left my last contract. I put it par with Pat Egan's contract. Those two contracts were the best contracts for wages, hours, and working conditions in the city. And that contract was approved by the largest margin by the members of any contract in New Haven's history. So that's something I'm really proud of. Protected our staffing, really helped the job move forward. So, I look back with fondness, but I don't miss the calls. And, oh, hey, I'll give you an important lesson. And I got this from George Washington. Okay. I was reading a book and I used to have somebody call me up, two people. They would drive me crazy, talk for hours. And I would always think I had to argue with people or like have a cogent debate in a respectful way. Like I had to win the issue. And I realized after reading this book, and it said, when Washington was debating somebody, if it wasn't a matter of consequence, if it wasn't going to be something that changed, instead of arguing, he would just ask questions to learn the issue more. So I was like, let me try this. So the next time the person called with their everyday gripe, I just asked questions. I didn't take a position. And at the end of the call was shorter. And at the end of the call, the person felt like I really paid attention to them, even though I disagreed with them. And it started building a rapport. And then that detractor actually became a supporter. And I'm like, you don't have to win every issue. Sometimes you just got to listen to people, hear where they're coming. And sometimes they're going to bring up that great point that's going to make you move a little bit this way or that way. But just listening to people will make you a better officer or a better leader, not on the fireground. Fireground, you can have that real short, quick conversation. And then if you say the order again, that's the order. But in the firehouse, it's okay to be a little bit more diplomatic.
Yeah, well, of course. And it goes a long way. And that's the key too. Even if you may not, and I'll use another sports analogy, for example. Me and the boys in college, we used to sit around and talk about, who was the GOAT, right? Michael Jordan or LeBron James. Now I'm in the Michael Jordan camp. But when somebody would say, no, it's LeBron, or sometimes even, no, it's Kobe Bryant, I would never say, you're crazy. Some of the other guys would. I'm like, why do you think that? And even if I disagreed, at least I better understood, why they lean towards LeBron or why they lean towards Kobe Bryant or some other player. I'm like, okay, I can see, even if I take a different position, as to why you feel the way you do. And sometimes the argument would be pretty compelling, or at least the point, if not the argument. So, with that being said, for context, because you mentioned the working hours now, for those of you unfamiliar with New Haven's setup, it's currently you work 3 day tours, then you have 3 complete days off, and then you work 3 night tours. And that's how the cycle continues. When you first got on, or prior to that particular contract taking effect, was that still the schedule, or what was the schedule prior if it wasn't that?
That was always the schedule that
It
we
was
had,
always scheduled. Okay.
which was I thought was a great schedule
Oh
because
yeah, that's pretty good.
nights in the firehouse are great.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And listen, days too, especially during when the weather's nice. You get a nice day like today was a really nice day, or yesterday was beautiful. It ain't so bad during the summertime. So making chief, or excuse me, actually making captain in 2015. Where did they assign you? Was this around the time you went and oversaw training?
Yeah, I was the number 2 in the training division. I was the drill master. So I was already had the operational authority of a battalion chief as a lieutenant. Because New Haven
Mhm.
strange, you can hold 2 ranks at the same time. You can
Yeah.
hold a suppression rank and a staff rank. It's just a strange place, but that's the way it works. So I made captain when I was the drill master, being paid as a battalion chief. So it didn't really change anything. And then I made battalion chief while I was the drill master as well.
Hmm. So, for those not familiar with the position, running drills or being the drill master as you were in this instance, I love the New Haven Fire School. West Haven, we're the center district, we're right down the street. So, it's a regional school. So, thank you for that because it allows surrounding departments to go there and train. And us in the center district, our department certainly takes advantage of that. It's a small complex. If you look at it, you wouldn't think a lot of training goes on there. There's a bailout building. There's also the classroom center to your right when you walk in, since renamed after Chief Grant. And then there's the live burn building. But for anyone that's been down there, either as a civilian like myself watching the training or as a firefighter who has participated in them that may be listening to this, they can tell you a lot goes on in such a compact space like that. So besides the obvious like live burns and bailouts, what were some of your favorite drills to run there?
I really liked those special operations drills I was doing. But the other thing that I did differently than the department did for live burns is what they used to do is they would bring down 5 companies and beat them up all day long and do evolution after evolution. So you got 6s, 10s, and 9s, where the chances are they go to a fire that day. And what they would tend to do is not finish the department because something else would happen because everything in the department goes through the training division. So when I got there, I was like, this is absurd. We need to get the chiefs to participate, not just the company officers. We need to get the lieutenants to participate, but I just want to do one live burn in the morning and one live burn in the afternoon. Same way I did special operations training. Dispatch them. Sometimes we would include the dispatchers in the training. Have the chief come down. Hey, I may not need you in the afternoon or morning. Pick one, but you're going to command the companies. We're going to have 5 companies. They're going to run through the evolution. We're going to put in some obstacle, a refrigerator in the hallway, a car in front of the hydrant, something that they have to overcome. Give them some cues. Put the forcible entry door there, something to make it interesting and fun. Do the drill, and then after the drill, critique it and let them go back. And what I found is, well, firefighters do, firefighters hate change and they hate the way things are. That's firefighters. So
Yep.
firefighters are always going to complain when they're getting called to the academy. But when I was down there, even my biggest detractors, Daryl Brooks was a big detractor of mine, used to say, I don't mind coming down here for training. Once they got there, they knew that it wasn't going to be punitive. They were going to do one evolution. It was going to be quality evolution. And then we were going to critique it. And so I kind of brought that to every drill. Same thing with doing Mayday training in the SCBA maze that we had a recruit class build. It's one of the best SCBA mazes in the country because I stole ideas. I'll go from Thomas Edison, borrowed brilliance from every maze that I've seen when I was teaching around the country. I took something from El Paso. I took something from what they do at FDIC, all these different departments. We put this maze in. And again, battalion chief and deputy chief, I'm going to bring in one company down at a time to do Mayday training. You have to come down. You don't got to be there all day. You got to come down for one and do the Mayday drill. And so they would answer the Mayday call. And then what I would find is these chiefs that would complain that they had to come down, and I'd be like, okay, you're all set. And they'd be like, oh no, I want to stay here. And then they would stay there. So that's how you get people to buy in the training, is that you got to make it fun. And if you're only doing that one evolution, the afternoon, I would do like 5 evolutions, but it'd only be one company. Company would leave, next company comes down. Get the chiefs involved. If you're a chief, your skills are perishable too. When the Mayday is called, you're getting that lunar information. Your job is to give direction and hope. And when they don't give a piece of that information, you have to ask to fill in the blanks of what you're not getting. Because we've seen throughout the country that, one, you got to ask the firefighter's name, because we've seen in Houston, New Haven, and Rockville, Maryland, where the firefighter that gave the mayday or the mayday was called for, they accounted for somebody else other than the firefighter calling the mayday. The RIT team saved somebody from the RIT team or pulled out a member from the truck that was searching from the firefighter. It happened. So you need the firefighter's name. The other thing is, if you're not getting the information back, you need to then ask, did anybody else on the fireground know where this company was last operating? You know, vital information. They don't get these skills unless they're on the radio training. It's so important. So just because you make chief doesn't mean you can sit in your office. It doesn't mean you should be married to the training division and you're there all day long. But you got to go at least through one evolution. You got to stay fresh so you can make that impact on the fireground. And guess what? It's going to build your respect, because if you're a chief officer, you shouldn't be working with your hands, right? You should be working with your head. You're at the strategic or tactical level. So where you can work with your hands, if you're one of the individuals that loves the job, yeah, when the recruit class is there, go make the pick off of the person on the third floor and carry him down the ladder. Force the door with the recruit class one time. They'll love you for it. But you can't do that at a fire. You got to rely on your personnel to do that.
Exactly. And again, a lot of gems tonight in regards to training and especially good leadership have been dropped. And that, I think, is the best one. That might be the highlight of the show. And I'm not being facetious when I say that, because, you know, again, and I harken back to something our department did a few weeks ago, RIT training. You know, our and all 4 shifts uninterrupted, hired back a whole shift to cover our station, cover our district. The guys went down from A, B, C, and D shift, in our case, in the center district, and went and did about a good 3 or 4 evolutions, took breaks in that little pavilion plaza that's there right before you get all to the old apparatus that's not used anymore. And not one person from any of the shifts complained about it. They all loved it. And that was part of it. The officers were on the radio. Some of the more senior firefighters were on the radio too, getting the firefighter's name, getting the location of the firefighter. It was a joint training with Mission CIT. And it's stuff like that that you harken back to. Yeah, guys crack their jokes and guys have a little bit of fun when appropriate during evolutions. But God forbid that situation becomes a reality. And it may, especially if you work in a city large enough at some point during your career, you're going to remember that. You're going to remember that training and you're going to know what to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, you know, I will ask you, before I get to a notable job that you had, and I have the picture of it here. That's Howard Avenue, which we'll bring up in just a bit. Being down at the fire school as well, it's interesting because you can still respond to jobs, I believe, if you can. And being a battalion chief, you had the opportunity to do that. So where you are, if you make a left, you're still in New Haven. You make a right, you're heading towards the Long Wharf area. But out of the fire academy, for those outside the area, you make a left and you're right on the border with Allentown, West Haven's district, and a little bit of the Ville. It's right past the cemetery. So being in that location, tell me about essentially having a huge chunk of the city to be first due to, or potentially be in charge of if you get there first as the chief officer, because that had to have been, I imagine, quite the eye opener as well, in addition to everywhere else that you worked.
When I was down in the training academy, I never jumped someone else's fire to be first due. And I learned this lesson from Tommy Gould. So Tommy Gould was a battalion chief. And when I was on truck 4, we were going to a job, and I saw the battalion chief pull over and let the truck and engine go by. And after the job, I asked Chief Gould, I said, Chief, I go, you know, why'd you pull over? He goes, the same reason why, as I'm the chief, I close the doors for the companies. It's not my job as chief to make decisions for the first due engine and the first due truck. I go there, look at how they set the table, and I cover their blind spots with the second due truck, the second due, third due, and fourth due engine. So what was nice about the training academy is we had the whole city. So whether I was home in a second alarm or some hazmat or rescue came, I could respond anywhere in the city, which was great. And I would always report to the command post, and being a battalion chief, I always wanted a division. It was rare that I was a safety officer. I'd get a division. That Howard Avenue fire, I came from home. And when I came from home, Billy Gould was the battalion chief. Yeah, he had the main fire and I had the he gave me the exposure. So, and the exposure was on fire as well. So that was great about being the drill master, is because you actually got to work with all the firefighters as they came up in the recruit class. You got to know everybody and you got to make an impact on these fires. I mean, you know, when you report to the command post and they give you the order, you know, if somebody gives you the order that just says, just say you're even a lieutenant, you report to the command post. They give you the order, go in there and put out the fire. That's the best order, because that means they really trust you and they know you're going to get the companies going. But one of the things to do as a firefighter, as a lieutenant, and as a chief that I always did, you always want to move with purpose, but take an extra second can save you minutes and your life when you're sizing up. You pull in the fire block. You're the lieutenant. You tell the driver, slow down. You want to find out what side of the street the wires are on, what side's the address on, where's your hydrants. Is the truck going to have problems with the trees? So I got to pull a little bit further past. When you're the chief, you want to walk up because your presence is going to impact the whole job. If you're running around, you just look unorganized. You look undisciplined. You walk down the street like you own the street, no matter what's happening. You're like Darth Vader. You could be losing in a building. You look like you're in control. You can't lose control. And you really need to take a look. And the lesson goes back to when I was a firefighter on Truck 4. Because I was an adjunct instructor, I'd usually get to pick 2 people out of the academy class to come to my firehouse. The chief always granted that for the instructors that would go down. And I would always, when a firefighter would be in their first fire and they'd be in the building, I'd stop them like Troy Adams. I'm sure you know him. I'd go, Troy, describe the building for me. And he'd be like, describe the building for me. And what I found is that firefighters and lieutenants could just tell you how many windows fire was coming out, how many windows smoke was coming out, but they kind of missed the whole picture of what's going on. So I started actually looking at the psychology of size up. And what I found is if you walk down Bacon Street in New Haven, if something moves, you're going to be immediately drawn to it. Same thing if you walk in the woods, because we used to be prey at one time. So we're hardwired as individuals, no matter who you are. If you see movement and there's a supposed threat, you are going to be focused on that movement. The other thing that our mind does is we are always looking for the light as humans. So anything that is bright, your eyes will automatically focus on first. So if you're a firefighter, lieutenant, or chief, and you're just looking at the building and you're just getting sucked into what's on fire, don't do that. If you're assigned to the hydrant, don't look at the fire. Hook up the hydrant first, then take your time to look at the fire. If you're the company officer, take that extra second. If you're the chief, take the extra second. Some people will tell you that on-scene radio report is for other companies. No, if you give the on-scene radio report the right way, and you're covering the building instruction, and you're looking at where the fire is, where is it going, and you kind of asking yourself some questions, what you're going to find is you're going to be that much better off in the emergency, because now those questions really take away that tunnel vision, because you're not just looking at the brightest thing. You're not just looking at the thing that can harm you. You're looking at what's the building instruction? What's the building layout for the windows? What are my mental measurements? When I go in this door, how far do I got to go before I hit that bedroom? It's critical for a firefighter, lieutenant, and chief. So taking that extra couple seconds really makes a difference as a chief officer. And when you're a division officer, remember, when you go to the command post and they give you an assignment, just because it's verbal, if they don't say it over the radio, make sure you say what your division number is and what companies are reporting to you. And then when you get there, just like I did on Howard Avenue, when you get to the fire floor, make sure if you got a division, say Division 3, when you get there, make contact with all those company officers to say, I'm Division 3, all your communications go through me. Have that face-to-face, because they might have missed that radio communications. You want to break down the fireground into manageable parts to really help out the incident commander. So I loved being a division chief.
I can tell. And it's that fog of war that can get you sometimes if you're not careful, kind of like what you talked about, because you have so many resources to manage all at once, especially if it's a box that's big enough to where it's going to extend beyond 1 or 2 companies, and there's been fires in our city over the years, and that was certainly one of them where that's been the case. You're getting a lot of help, which is a good problem to have, but you want to make sure you manage exactly where everyone is. And, it's again, another good point to bring up. So that resource management, and that's something that, again, for those of you that have gone through EMT class, this, the FEMA modules, one of the things that they talk to you about is crew resource management. That's a big part of it, because it talks about the NIMS principles and the chain of command and the unity of command. And that's a pivotal way to maintain it. I want to go back, speaking of fires, because you talking about this allowed me to remember this particular job. I was about 6 or 7 years old when it went down, and I'm sure Ford truck went, but I want to know if you were working for it. The Brass Monkeys Inferno back in 2007. Please tell me you were there.
I was there, but I was called back. It was at shift change, and I actually made a trench cut inside the foundry. There was a foundry behind the Brass Monkey where we had fire coming up, and they actually ordered us to make a trench cut, not in the roof, but in the floor. So it was a great fire. Wasn't there first two, was there on the spare truck when I got into work, but still got work when I got there.
Oh yeah, that was again. I have to pull up a picture for it. It's about 2007, I believe. It was at a bar of some sort, bar slash restaurant that went up at the time, right in the heart of downtown. So it was a popular spot too, which is a shame. But I'll try to find a picture for it in the meantime. But with that being said, as you make battalion chief, and there's more changes going into the fire service, particularly in New Haven. Tell me about just trying to make sure you stayed fresh with modern emergencies and modern adaptations. Because here's the thing with New Haven, like I said earlier, a lot of construction's going up. We're having a bit more high rises going up. You're getting a bit more of a population increase of people migrating to the city. It's a lot to keep track of. And if you're a step behind, you're not able to keep track of it. So juggling that along with making sure new recruits were educated, what were some of the things you tried to brainstorm in your office and think of that could allow the training to remain fun, but also allowing it to maintain up to date?
Utilizing your personnel. What are they having issues with? What are the lieutenants seeing? What are the captains seeing out there? And then also, I would stay up to date because of my role at Fire Engineering Magazine. So, and on the board for FDIC. So, I was always taking classes, always teaching, and always trying to bring that back to New Haven. But it's always still about those SOPs and ensuring the basics, making training fun, non-punitive, and getting the companies out. And those last years of my career, those last 4 years, our focus was really getting that heavy rescue and moving to a SOC model of all hazards. And at the same time, we were negotiating the contract. So it was a really busy time. It was a great career. It was fun. And I mean, the right in Dixville Station, there's a plaque on the wall that says, still the greatest job in the world. And it's all what you make of it. Don't you become a firefighter, don't get sucked in to this or that. Even with all the politics, it's the best job in the world. And remember, when politics or you suffer some adversity, the public didn't put that on you. It may be some inner politics, or maybe the mayor's office. It may be something else that things. Remember, it's always about the people you're working with and the community you're serving, and take time to interact with the community. It's amazing how many firefighters out there, Mike, think they work for the FBI, that they can't talk to the public at a fire or a medical. There's only two things you can't say to the public. You can't say somebody's medical history, and you can't say anything about cause and origin. After that, you can talk to the neighbors. They want to talk to you. You can put the kid on the fire truck when you're shopping. You could go talk to people. It's amazing how many firefighters are like, they don't like say anything to anybody. Everybody wants to talk to a firefighter. You're not a cop. Everybody likes you. So be likable.
Right. No, and that's true. It's true, and I see that a lot. And I guess, listen, I get it, especially for newer guys. They're so concerned with making sure they're prim and proper and don't mess up. They forget that part. But hey, listen, people gravitate towards the fire department because it's completely, and this is no knock on the police, it's a completely different thing. You're not often able to see the police during the good times because usually when they're called, nothing good's happening. But it's different with the fire department when you come in, it's a little kid, or you want your smoke detector replaced or something along those lines. Before I get to asking you about your retirement in 2020, I did want to ask you about Chief Grant. I don't know how much you were able to deal with him, but the New Haven Fire School bears his name, and he was someone who was beloved. And I can tell by the smile on your face that you did deal a lot with him. So give me your memories of him.
Chief Grant was a great fire officer. He was just a great, salty fire officer. He wasn't an administrator, and he wouldn't mind that I said that. And his success as administrator came from when Pat Egan became the assistant chief and really helped him navigate the politics of the city. Just one thing was funny is that somebody sent them a letter, a firefighter sent them a letter, and they said, the chief didn't respond. And I'm like, you sent them a letter? They said, yeah, I was told by the officer to send the chief a letter, and he never responded. I saw him. It was like he never saw it. I said, did you light the letter on fire? He's like, no. I'm like, well, then he didn't care about it. He just was an operations salty guy. And he was chief of ops when I came in. I ran, numerous fires with him over the years. Great fire officer. I love Chief Grant, and we butt heads a couple times, and we had a fatal fire on in Fairhaven, where one thing they often don't talk about is, yeah, great. It's great to make that grab and to save a life. But one of the hardest things for firefighters to reconcile is when they save multiple lives, but also lose a couple kids. And so, there's a story in the book, and I'll let somebody read it in the book, but Chief Grant wasn't big on peer support or EAP. And we had some words, but in the end, I won out. But great firefighter, loved the job, loved New Haven, and he should have just stayed chief of operations forever, because he came up for training, and he was just a great guy. I don't have anything bad to say about him. We had a lot of fun with Chief Grant over the years.
Well, actually, I'll forego the retirement question temporarily while I get to the book, Command Presence, because we've talked a little bit about it tonight. Now we can dive in. The book, well, the title means what it says, Command Presence. You take it away. Got it right there.
The book is Command Presence, Increase Your Influence, and basically it's very few successes and most of my failures in the fire service. But when I was writing it, I was like, wow, I really sucked at my job, because I basically tried to write an honest book, because I wanted you, whether you were a firefighter, lieutenant, chief, going up, I wanted you to be able to take something away from it. Because at some point in your career, you're going to find yourself on a tough shift. You're going to find yourself in front of a room of people who don't agree with you. You're going to have to talk to the press. You're going to be involved in some kind of negotiation. So the book is a wide range of tactical lessons. So it's not just stories. It's after there's a story, it's what's the tactical takeaway? How can I apply this to my position to increase my influence? And everybody wants to be just a little bit more influential in anything they do. And the book has some great contributors, from the chief of Houston, Mike Champo from FDNY, Howard Blythe from FDNY, Dave Polikoff from Montgomery County, Anthony Castros, Anthony Villo. I mean, everybody contributed to this book to just take it up the next notch. And you mentioned CT Mission. I'm going to mispronounce it. What was it?
That Mission's DIT.
Okay, they did the questions for the back of the book for every single chapter, and Jason DeCremer did a great job. But I'm really proud of the book. And literally, it's kind of the, hey, if you're a firefighter, if you're an officer, things as you go through your career, this is a great book, great gift, and check it out. But it's based off more of my failures than my successes.
And I will link it in the description of this episode for those that want to buy it. And I will say it's well worth the read. I got to read the PDF version of it and definitely have enjoyed it a lot. 2020, just about 23 years on the job, and a lot that's gone on. Seeing your passion, it's almost like you're still on the job. So I have and I say this with no disrespect, I have a very hard time believing you actually walked away. Something tells me you're still on the job, even though my outline here says you're not. So when you walked away from New Haven in 2020, sometimes it's a series of moments. Sometimes there's one definitive moment. What was it, or what were the combination of things that ultimately led you to say, all right, I've had a good run here. It's been a lot of fun. I've had a blast, but time to move on.
Well, that first fire that we talked about, not first fire, but one of those fires I had at Truck 4 where I fell in the shaft at Yale with my shoulders, had a surgery. And then in Fairhaven, made a successful rescue with a great team from 10s in Truck 3, and had another surgery. And then my last fire in New Haven was in February of 2020. I had the basement division, and I had a radio short from Motorola radio because of water. And the chief called a mayday for me. I ended up operating alone in the basement, and Matt Thomas found me in the basement. And when Matt got me to the stairs, I was fine. I could have just walked up, and somebody grabbed my shoulder straps and ripped and pulled me up the stairs, and the bottle kept catching the Bilko doors, stairs that are concrete. And they kind of threw me on the ground, and they were like, we got him. And we made a rescue. I'm like, rescue? That was more like a mugging. I was fine. All I had to do was come. I just needed another company, and we would have put out the fire. But they couldn't hear me on the radio, so they wouldn't give me another company. So they thought I was in distress when I wasn't. So went to the surgeon again, and they said, basically, my shoulders are so shot that I'm facing diminishing returns. So I could do anything down low, great. I can't do anything good above there without just. So it was time to go. was union president, battalion chief, drill master. I did it. And then I stay active, contributing editor to Fire Engineering Magazine, on the board of FDIC. I'm teaching at FDIC. I'm teaching at Providence Safety and Survival class in October. Even my work for a conservative think tank. I just had an article published in the Daily Caller advocating for the New York City firefighters and Seattle firefighters who got fired or forced out because of the mandates. It's another great leadership message, Mike, is that here policies were made off a faulty premise about that if you got the vaccine, you couldn't spread it. Okay. So that was fair. They thought, hey, if you got the vaccine, you couldn't spread it. So we were going to mandate it. But unfortunately, once the mandates ended and they realized that the science, that the vaccine doesn't stop the spread, instead of just hiring back those retired New York City firefighters and those Seattle firefighters in the department, and this isn't a red or blue situation, because Houston, Texas is a blue city in a red state, and they didn't do a mandate. And that's the fourth biggest department in the country. So this was where politicians and chiefs, and this is a lesson to everybody, they attach their ego to a policy. And then when new information came in, instead of just changing the policy and saying, hey, we made a good faith decision based off the facts, and now the facts changed, and now we're going to rectify that decision, because they attached their ego to that policy, they were unable to change without losing a little bit of their dignity. And we still have firefighters in New York City right now, Bravest for choice. I was just talking to Mike, one of the lieutenants from FDNY, before I got on here. They got firefighters like Tom LaPola, battalion chief, retired because he was forced out because of the mandates. Bring them back. So I was able to put that in the Daily Caller article about a SCOTUS case, that here these firefighters need help. So I'm still always advocating for the fire service, and still Tommy Leonard is a lieutenant in Bridgeport Fire Department and a chief in Derby, Connecticut. He's going to get his first article published in Fire Engineering. I helped him kind of craft that up. So congratulations to Tommy. So my hands are still in it, and I love the job, and I do anything I can to help anybody do interview prep. I got my hands in everything.
No, I can see that.
My wife, God bless her, she's probably tired of the fire department, but my phone rings all the time.
Oh, there you go. And it rang with my call to have you on this show. So I guess that brings us to the rapid fire. But here's the thing. Most of these questions you've already answered. You answered funniest call. You answered uplifting. So I'll ask you just a couple of the, and even advice to fire officers too. We covered that. So I'll ask you just two of them. And the first of the two that I'll ask you is favorite night in the firehouse. Is it Super Bowl night? Is it Saturday, Friday, whatever? What day is your favorite night in the firehouse?
Every night in the firehouse. Anytime you could have a night in the firehouse where you get the shift together. And Bobby Gahuli in New Haven did it the best. Put your phones away. We're eating dinner. Get everybody to eat together. One of the problems in every firehouse in America now is everybody on their phone. Everybody's on their phone, and they get these like silos. No, if you're a company officer, the best night is nights in the firehouse. Get everybody to eat together. Even if you got to pay for the meal, get everybody to eat together. It really builds that camaraderie, the brotherhood, the sisterhood. It's so important. You can't lose the meal. So best night is any night in the firehouse where you can get everybody eating together and sitting in front of the firehouse and interacting with the neighborhood.
Yeah, that sounds good. No, listen, I agree with that completely. There's a joke that Lou from Getting Salty makes all the time to me and the guys. He's like, "What's better than Friday night in the firehouse? Saturday night in the firehouse." So as you said, any night. And the other one is there's a lot of great food to choose from in New Haven. You worked on Lombard, you know all the Spanish joints. You worked out in Dixwell, you know all the joints out there. And you were down in the fire academy. There's a few Spanish and black joints around that particular area if you make a left or a right. So favorite bar or restaurant in New Haven, if you could pick one.
Okay, so favorite restaurant is Portofino's. That's the place to be seen, because every politician, as union president, you had to go there. Every politician's there. Favorite pizza isn't going to be the choice of the visitors, the tourists. I liked Bar. I liked Bar, Modern, then Sally's, then Pepe's. But Bar makes a great pie.
Yeah,
Bar
Modern
great pie. And
I haven't been to Bar yet.
You got to go to Modern. But I like Bar's pizza, and Bar has, out of all of them, Bar has the best atmosphere on Crown Street. So if you watch Barstool Sports and you're going to say, I'm going to Pepe's or Sally's, make sure you go to Bar. That's where the locals like to go, and go to Modern, and then go to Sally's and Pepe's. And best cart in the city is by Yale New Haven Hospital. The guy who makes sausage grinders is the best. It's the first sausage grinder cart next to the hospital is the best sausage grinder in the city.
Oh yeah. And Modern I've been to, Sally's I've been to, Pepe's, I like them all. I gotta say, one of my favorites, you'll know what I'm talking about. Me and my friends go there quite a bit. We want to go there again. Yorkside's pretty darn good. I got nothing but love for Yorkside. I really like their pizza too. Right next to Toad's Place.
It's hard to get it's hard to get a bad pizza. It's the pizza capital of the world. See,
exactly.
Something Rosa Delore and I agree on. See, building bridges on Mike in New Haven.
building bridges indeed. And before we go, James DiNapoli says hello. He says my wife Leah is retired NHFD Engine 5. She says hello, and Frank is the best. So shout out.
Leah was a great firefighter. Had the honor of being one of the instructors in her training academy class. She did a great job throughout the department. Again, anybody can do this job if they have the passion. And firefighters don't rise to expectations. They fall to their level of training and functional physical fitness. And Leah is a great example of that. She put her best foot forward, physically fit, always cared about the job, was a great firefighter.
She was on Getting Salty a while ago as well. So for those of you that may not have seen her interview, it was a few months back. I highly suggest you go back and watch, which Mr. DiNapoli, I believe, was also on as well. It's a very, very enjoyable episode for sure. So, Frank, this has been great. Before we say goodbye to the audience, to stick around, we'll talk off air. And besides the book, of course, Command Presence, of which I'll link in the description of this episode. Any shout outs to anyone or anything you want to give?
No, just remember, leadership doesn't have to do with rank, whether you have rank or not. Always look to those people that are going to mentor you, and you got to ask to be mentored. The biggest influences in my fire service career, besides my brothers, Jim and John, was Tommy King, who was a firefighter, and John Kay, who was a firefighter in Montgomery County, who's now a captain in the city of Detroit. So again, when they made the impact, they were all firefighters. So being a firefighter, it's also the most fun. So no matter how high you get up in rank, the more responsibility, the farther you are away from the kitchen table. So the most fun you'll ever have is being a firefighter.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Like I said, stick around. We'll talk off the air. Coming up next on the Mike the New Haven podcast, we don't have a show this Friday, nor do we have one next Monday. So we'll be back Friday, June 7th. So a mini sabbatical for the show. And next week will be quite the episode. It'll be Greg Lee, retired special agent out of the DEA, I believe. And what makes Greg special, besides the career he had, is Greg is the one who caught Ramsey Youssef, the 1993 World Trade Center bomber. So he's going to be on to talk about that manhunt, which lasted 2 years from 93 right up until Youssef was caught in the spring of 1995. That'll be another volume of The Beat, Profiles of Police Nationwide. As always, thanks to everyone who tuned in tonight or will tune in or listen to this later. For those of you tuning in on the audio side from their 1996 album Load, which is one of my favorites by them, or by any band, really, it is Metallica, Hero of the Day. That's the song you're about to hear again off their 96 album Load. Put out 2 classics in that span, Load in 96, Reload 97. In the meantime, on behalf of retired New Haven Battalion Chief Frank Ricci, I am Mike Colón. This has been Volume 3 of the Best, the Bravest Nationwide Edition. And we will see you next time. And please, folks, send a defibrillator to me tomorrow night, because with this Game 5 of Rangers-Panthers, I'm going to need it. Take care. Good night. And for better or worse, go Rangers.